What is up, Vinyl community? Welcome back to the latest Zoom session. Today I'm welcoming VC fan favorite, Teddy. What's up, Teddy?
Karen, Special K, how you doing, man?
Good. Very excited that you were able to do this, that we can do this together. I know that the people that follow my channel and your channel will be excited to see you back. You've had a little absence. You made your little reappearance last week. There's always a nice little buzz that goes through the vinyl community when you do pop up.
Well, yeah, as I said, been a year and a half gap, where I was literally away from home, and so it became very difficult to do any kind of social media thing. So I am back home, and and using this great opportunity with you as well to just kind of re-engage, get my feet wet again, and and in the near future, reactivate with some new videos. And
Looking forward to it.
but no, what you guys are doing, you and Mark and John, and how you've been able to make something really positive, out of a negative situation going on worldwide. It's a really cool addition to what, how the VC started out as just kind of a singular deal, and now this sharing stuff is just, it's really cool.
Thank you. I selfishly love doing them because I get to hear, a little bit more history and some in-depth insight into the people that I admire and have learned from and continue to learn from. So it's been great for me in that respect. And in terms of just positive, I find the VC in general, it's kind of positive energy throughout it, since I've been a part of it for the past 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it's been. But yeah, so my format, as I shared with you, is kind of to get a bit of an overview of your history with how you got into music and how it evolved, and how your collection has evolved and how it continues to, and then share some records. So the first question I like to ask now is, what's your first memories of music bringing you joy?
Sure. Well, and I suspect I'm probably the oldest guest that you've had. So, I come from a different era where vinyl already existed, but music was around in my house. I had two older brothers, 7 and 9 years older than me, so they were already had 45s. I can clearly remember there was it was Elvis Presley Jailhouse Rock 45 that was in the house that really hooked me. I mean, I still love that song, man. It's kick ass. It's hard, for Elvis. And my parents had some LPs, but it was, some big band things, or, Ray Conniff singers, stuff like this. And one of the things, growing up, LPs were really something that our parents had. Us baby boomers, it was 45s. That was our deal. That's how we kind of separated, from our.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, no, that LPs were for adults, because that was like, classical music and other things. And so then, the radio was huge. And top 40 radio, there was a formatted stations that, had this top 40 format that, every week they would publish the top 40 list, and you'd pick it up at the drugstore, check off things, but at that time, 45s were just ubiquitous. I mean, you would buy them in your local drugstore. They were everywhere, just everywhere. They're easy to obtain.
cheap, easy way to obtain a song that was
Yeah.
but was it mostly popular music, like stuff that? How would you get, like, what years are we talking here that when you were buying?
Okay. So, well, I'm talking, okay, so there's a, a clear line of demarcation of when the Beatles hit.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 6 when that happened. And it's really hard to explain to anybody that wasn't there because, of course, it was just a few months upon the heels of the Kennedy assassination, which was just, it was just, even for a 6-year-old, it was funky, it was dour, it was weird. And the Beatles just flipped the script. And overnight, I mean, and they literally sucked the air out of the world's room for a while. I mean, there won't ever be anything like it with media being so fractured today. Yeah, I mean, my brothers and I, we had to lobby my dad really hard to watch them on Ed Sullivan when they made their American, appearance. And I can remember my dad just sitting there shaking his head like, what has the world come to?
That's the worst thing you could imagine.
Well, I mean, God, they were like coming from Mars, the hair, their collarless suits, beyond, the music, just their style, persona, demeanor, dress, everything was just so out of left field, and they just took over. And so that's really, so I'm about 6, and it just went crazy listening to the radio and collecting 45s and getting those lists and checking off what you have or debating with your friends. I mean, those lists and 45s were on a par with baseball cards,
Mm.
for us as small kids. But I'll fast forward about 4 years to 1967. And my oldest brother came home from his first year in college, and he had a stack of LPs under his arm. Now, you think about 1967 in the rock world and all of these records that came out that year, Sgt. Pepper's, of course, The Doors, Cream, Jimi Hendrix, Pink Floyd. Yeah, it just goes on and on and on. Well, he had this stack of records under his arm, and it was like, whoa, 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 what? I'm 10 years old now, and this really intrigued me. And he had this one record under his arm that, for LPs, was the beginning of it for me. And I can't tell you why at 10 this made such an impact. But as kids, I don't know if you did, I religiously read every bit of text on a cereal box while chowing down, cereal. And these albums became an extension of that, all of this stuff. And on the back here, so they're talking about Eric Clapton, and it says, Eric Clapton epitomizes all that is, in parentheses, blues. No clue what the hell they were talking about. And then you're reading, these guys that wrote some of these songs. Robert Johnson. Whoa. There's some guy named Muddy Waters. Skip James. Who are these people? And really from that point forward and continuing today, it's just been this continuous effort to connect dots, and it really has been a lifelong learning thing, and I want it to continue to be a lifelong learning thing. And but yeah, no, this and my brother never got this one back. He just didn't.
Is that the
And
same copy?
huh?
Is that the
This is
same
the one,
copy?
baby. This is the
Wow.
one. I'll probably go to the grave with it, but it's this is immensely meaningful. But So I just was enamored with this stuff, and I would hitch a ride. You know, my brothers being older, they had driver's licenses. I would hitch rides with them. I'd find out where people were going. You know, like if my parents were going to a department store, I would definitely go because there were record sections everywhere.
Totally.
So, but it was basically window shopping. You know, I'd be plowing through, digging through, understanding what they had, where stuff was. So, you know, when I had a little bit of money, either through, you know, an allowance at home and later, like, you know, mowing yards for money, I knew where to go, you know, with hitch rides, you know, to go get stuff. And, but, you know, and it was so different, you know, pre-internet, everything was word of mouth. You learned word of mouth. You learned from friends. You learned from friends' older siblings. It was always kind of older siblings that had the key to the kingdom, you know, the information key.
One thing that's interesting is like it's still through the internet, but what we've done here with the vinyl community is kind of like tap into that word of mouth aspect of
Ab-
sharing music.
and that absolutely, I mean, you're spot on with that. Um,
It's
so
supercharged.
yeah, yeah. So word of mouth, the radio, um, you know, later things like, you know, Rolling Stone magazine came into being, and there'd be reviews and things. So you know, and then I was around when underground FM radio came into being, and we had a couple stations in
Where
Kansas
did you
City,
grow up to for context, people? You
Missouri.
born and bred.
Yeah. So, and there you could hear long album tracks, and you would hear The Low Spark of High Heeled Boys by Traffic. You would hear a Grateful Dead song. You would hear Allman Brothers, you know, live at Fillmore East tracks. And, you know, that was a whole nother education, you know, these extended
Yeah, not just the
jamming.
radio singles.
Yep. Yeah. So I'd say around, you know, and then I got a driver's license, and guess what I did the first day I got my driver's license?
Went to buy records.
Yeah, I asked my mom, I said, "Hey, is there anything you need at the grocery store?" And she said, you know, "Hey, as a matter of fact, yeah, you know." So I went and picked up what it was that she wanted. And then I said, "Hey, I'm heading to the record store." And that's where I went. There was that particular record store was also open on Christmas Day. And all I ever asked for Christmas was some cash. I didn't ask for any, you know, I didn't, you know, give them a list of albums. It just, money is awesome. And I would immediately, as soon as the festivities kind of slowed down, I was in the car, I was out to that store, and I was taking care of Christmas.
But
um,
I just still do that today with my girlfriend, or when we're traveling, or even in the city. It's like, oh, we're going here. Like I'm like always secretly, well, I could pop into this record store. It hasn't changed from when you were a kid, and I was going to the mall with my parents.
yeah, but I could say back in the day, you know, where you're constantly scouting, and who has what. And uh, I would say it's pretty common that probably some customers of stores know the stock better than the people that work there,
Hmm.
you know, because you just pawn through it just
All the time.
constantly.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I was really struggling with through all of this, and I harken back to that Cream record, was blues. I
We've
couldn't
spoken a bit
find it. I
about
didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to approach it, you know, and it just wasn't really in the stores per se. And I finally found one, you know, Washboard Sam. You know, it was this with Big Bill Brunzi, and it was just like, you
Is that
know,
because of where you lived that you weren't able to get access to it in terms of the as records? Because I mean, they were selling somewhere.
yeah, I'm assuming they figured
The market wasn't there for.
Local market, wasn't, they were around somewhere,
Yeah,
just, not, they weren't going to be in a department store, and they weren't going to be at a, in a drugstore. I hadn't found the secret honey holes yet.
tapped into the source.
Yeah. I just, hadn't expanded.
How did that journey begin? How did
Yeah,
you
I didn't know anybody that said, "Oh, well, if that's what you want, you need to,"
go here?
yeah, kind of thing.
And you couldn't look it up on the internet.
No, you really had to find somebody that knew something about it, who could clue you in, and that's really what it was, cluing you in, getting clued in. Anyway, so I'd say around 1972, I was kind of, and I was, it was all rock related stuff, you know. Um, Around 72, I was getting a little bit, a little bit bored with it, looking for something different, you know. I guess it was 73, maybe. There was this show on television. This was another really cool thing. There's a show that was called ABC's In Concert, and it was on Friday nights. It came on midnight here, and it was a really cool format because they took cameras into actual concerts. A lot of them seemed to be like college campuses.
Where a lot of good music was happening.
Yeah, and they would like have a 20-minute segment with, you know, Alice Cooper, and a 20-minute segment with Hot Tuna, and a 20-minute segment, with Allman Brothers, whatever, this is 1973. And this one episode came on and they were kind of listing who was going to be on the show. And the last group was, I'd never heard of them. And they had this wild name, the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Who the hell is that? So anyway, you have to consider in 1973, the average length of a teenage guy's hair, somebody under 30 was here, average length. And so it's time for Mahavishnu Orchestra. And this guy struts out on stage and he's got short hair. And it's like, you can see his ears. And he's dressed in all white and he's got this double neck Gibson electric guitar. And suddenly he's playing the shit out of it. And it's like, what is going on? I couldn't wrap my head around it. I just knew it, was something different. I didn't understand what was happening. But I went out and immediately their album Birds of Fire was out. I bought that. And they had this song Miles Beyond. And it was about, Miles Davis. Who's Miles Davis? And so in the attempt in connecting the dots, I quickly found Bitches Brew. And of course,
That was your intro.
In 1973, it's like, they're saying, bitch, they're saying bitches. Oh my God. Had to kind of hide it at home. It's like,
Big time.
the cover was damn near pornography, Anyway, that album became this major hub of all of these spokes that led into the jazz discovery, because all the people that played on that, now you could go into a jazz section and go, oh, Herbie Hancock, Dave Holland, Keith Jarrett, on and on it went. And so ECM Records was starting out, and this record store I went to was getting these import German copies of ECM stuff. So here's Dave Holland, here's Jack DeJohnette, here's Keith Jarrett, and so it spread really quickly, just like COVID-19. And
you were digging it. What you were discovering, you were into it.
Yeah, and then I could go to the library and find jazz history books, or a book about Miles Davis and this and that, and I would just read, and because of Miles Davis, I could work backwards as well. And I discovered there was this guy named Charlie Parker who was from my city, and he seems to be a pretty big name, and so Miles Davis, I was just able to work it from so many directions. And I probably I will dive deep into something for a few years at a time. um so then I went into this jazz deep dive. Then went to college, went to art school, and was at the right place at the right time when punk and new wave hit, you know. And so the irony and the quirkiness, somebody at school had the Ramones album, and you've got, Blitzkrieg Bop and Beat on the Brat with a baseball bat, and we were just laughing our asses off. And then Talking Heads came around, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, these guys went to one of our sister art schools. They're art school guys like us, so they became, so I got totally involved and totally immersed in that whole punk and new wave thing. And met David Byrne and Talking Heads, and saw the Ramones. And there was a little club that these people, like the Police, when nobody knew who the hell they were, would rumble through. And it was sort of like a little secret society that we had. And just loved, I love the irony, the irony, and like I said, the quirkiness of it all. It just was where my head was at. It was like, okay, this is something new and different. And then just a few years later, that kind of ran its course. And
So now we're into what year?
let's say 1980 now.
Yeah.
Got out of school and got a gig at the best record store in Kansas City. And then during my time there, it evolved into, I became the jazz and blues buyer. So now I had access to blues records like I never had before. And I went on a blues cruise, man, deep into it. And I like the switch from this ironic, quirky stuff to a music that, a lot of the artists were, there was an honesty to it, a truth telling. And despite people's perceptions of blues music, it encompasses the full range of human emotion.
Mm.
It's not just bad luck and trouble. There's also good times about having
Very good times.
I'm in a really good mood right now, and I'm going to make a song about it. So yeah, it's not what people, the perception of it. And got to do some interesting things there. I got to hang out with Muddy Waters in his dressing room, one point, and we had a really awesome, what a gentleman. Had an awesome discussion with him and stuff. But again, I'll tell you, man, when you're working in a record store, at that time, it was such a, it was like the barber shop for the baby boomers. This is where people hung out. I mean, they came and hung out for literal hours. So there would be conversations about music, about politics, about sports, whatever was going on. It was
the place to kind of hang out and shoot the
shit. Everything was in the air and open for discussion and debate. But when it came to music and customers, you had to figure out how the hell to talk about it, how the hell to describe it, And the guy who became one of my best friends, who ran the classical section, most learned person of classical music I've ever known. He was a music history major in college. And this guy, his name was David Conn, Conn. Every Friday night, he had a listening session at his apartment. It was an open door thing, but every Friday, it was a master class. It would start out, he would play, he was really 20th century classical was his thing. And he would start and he'd play this stuff and he would talk about it. And as, certain amounts of imbibing, took over, it would move over into other things like reggae. But, and people would bring records, but it always started with David's
Classical.
the lecture. And I didn't really, I didn't connect with classical per se. And then, boy, I wish he was here. He passed away a few years ago. But he sat me down one time and he played me this incredibly avant-garde piece of classical music that, to your ears seemed like it was completely improvised. And he goes, okay, wrap your head around this. He said, this is completely notated music. Every note is on the page. And I said, so he looked at me and he goes, so you tell me what's weirder and more impressive, someone who can make this up out of thin air, or someone who can write this down and make it sound like it's coming up out of thin air. I've never been able to answer it, but at that moment, he was able to make that connection for me. And now, granted, it was edgy outside stuff, but I was able to make the connection. And then he was able to take and work me backwards, to where I could listen to, Beethoven or Mozart or whatever. But that's how it worked, man. It was people. You had to have sort of musical Sherpas, that help you along. And like you said, that's the VC has been, immensely important. And I'll say it's important in this realm, yeah, I've been at it a long time, but I'm still learning. I'm still learning from others. It's like you see people
Endless.
and stuff, people are just into different grooves, and it may not be something that you've explored.
Yeah. What, when were you buying? I remember you talking about just scooping up all the the 70s Blue Notes cutouts. Was that when you were working at the record store?
No, prior. That's in
That was
this.
when you were first getting.
Yeah, that's in this jazz discovery phase that was hard and heavy from like 73 to 80ish. And so you do you know what a cutout bin is?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've never seen
You've heard of it,
Yeah.
There were some records that just seemed to be released and immediately were in the cutout bin, but I tried to be really frugal with my money. And so there was this magic number, $30, $30. And you could go into a store, maybe you get one or two new releases, and then you cruise the cutout bins. Well, there was this one store that, had all of these, it's the Blue Label, white and black B, Blue Notes of all the classic stuff. That's where I got my Blue Notes. I don't have any reason to seek out anything earlier, and frankly, I think they sound great. I know.
I was telling you about that fellow Lucas, who was comparing big into Blue Note, and he was comparing the Tone Poets with the 70s pressings, and said the 70s pressings were sounding better to him, to his ear.
Yeah. And the other thing I would do, I would get like a lot of comps and twofers.
Those were big in the 70s.
Yep, because it was just a way to get more music under your belt, and then you would start to discover people that were also into jazz, friends, go over to their house, listen, talk, discuss.
So how many records would you say you had by the time you were going off to college?
Well, I never lived in the dorm, but everybody,
Did you bring all your records
every dorm room had a turntable, speakers, and a record collection.
with?
But I probably had more than most.
Really, already? And did you bring it with you, everything, your whole collection, or do you?
Oh, I've moved it everywhere I've gone. But probably when I went off to college, I might have had a couple hundred.
Already,
Which
yeah.
was a lot. Which was a lot.
That's a lot.
Even for then. But being at the record store, of course, gave me access to, there was a major expansion. At that point, it's like, yes, welcome to my world of organized hoarding.
So then how did that, knowing that a lot of us were into music, like my generation, like through CDs and digital, and then got back into vinyl, how did it go for you, knowing that you were already buying records, and then how did that affect your listening, your music consumption, knowing that you always kept your records? I don't think you ever got rid of them, but when
Right.
CDs
Well,
digital.
yeah. So I was at that store from 1980 to 84 and then moved to the East Coast. And I was actually, for a couple years there, I was making my living completely through the art world. I was making videotapes that were existing in the art world and on television in different countries. And some of them are in museums, art museums, things like this. But I was actually making my living through my art. But I just didn't have 2 extra nickels to rub together. So this is the time when CDs were coming on. So I just didn't really play in that. I just I held my hand with what I had. I could probably count in about 3 year span there. I could probably count the vinyl that I bought on one hand.
You weren't. But was there, like, just rewinding for a sec, at the record store when you were working there and then going into this period after, was it mostly new stuff at the record store, or was the used kind of a big part of what was going on then, or not yet?
Well, our record store was all new, because we also were, the guy that owned it, in the basement there was a distributorship of independent labels, jazz, blues, and bluegrass primarily, some folk. About a block and a half away was an amazing used store. So we were all we dovetailed together just greatly. Yeah, we just didn't deal with it, but this amazing store called the Music Exchange was a couple blocks away, block and a half, and that was used only, and it was just stocked.
So were you still like working at a record store that was selling new stuff? Were you still going and hunting some used stuff? Or
of course I was. Because those guys would come into our store and we'd lay on a heavy discount to them. We'd go over to their store and they'd lay a heavy discount on, my friend David, the classical guy, he went from our store over to that one, so we had, we always had avenues to do stuff. But then, I bought some CDs. I did. You could not, because there's just cool stuff that was coming out that wasn't on vinyl. But I just never liked the format. Where I talked about reading the covers like cereal boxes. It was just with these, where you needed a magnifying glass to get in and read the text of what was going on. It just didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't.
Very different.
It just didn't feel right to me. I mean, I still have a CD player. I still have, my CDs. I dip into them, now and again. But vinyl is my format of choice by far.
So you never, I mean, you slowed down obviously that
Yeah.
period, but in the 90s, were you buying records still?
Um, yeah. I mean, it was generally used.
Used, yeah. Well, yeah.
But, I mean, yeah, you had to. You know.
So you were still, what was your buying habits then, and your seeking out of, was it still like going back and finding old music? Was that what you were doing in the 90s? As well as new stuff, but
Yeah, it was mostly working backwards.
yeah, like we do now. That's what I'm doing, but I'm
Yeah.
just wondering if that
Yeah.
was something you were continuing to do, always working backwards through discovering, as we do, the who played on who, this played, he played with him, and
Yeah, because with my friend David, the classical guy, I'd go and of course, you know, classical music collectors were one of the first ones to just wholesale dump their collections for CDs, because wow, now I can get a symphony uninterrupted. And I understand that, you know,
yeah,
I understand that, but and still to this day, used classical is obtainable, if it's something that you're interested in. But I could go in, see David and say, anything cool come in, and he'd point me to some stuff. So I mean, I was still grabbing, going backwards in jazz, and then I was expanding my classical collection at that time. And then around 2000, let's say, I probably went on about a 5-year hiatus from buying anything, because what I was involved in was trying to figure out an audio system. Friend of mine here, we just teamed up and we were buying and flipping stuff on AudioGone. Stuff would come in, it would go, okay, it was Sophie's choice. It was, okay, which one of these amps is going to stay and which one's going to go. And trying to figure out, again, frugally, trying to come up with the best system I could. And we learned so much because he was doing the same thing. But every so often, one weekend, we would absolutely switch wholesale systems. What was sounding awesome in his house would be constructed down here, and it would sound like shit. And what I had sounding really good would sound like shit in his place. He had a much more lively space.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was, really doing the audiophile thing, but just trying to do it because, I'd stuck to a budget and just trying to figure it out,
So
it's
you
like,
were finding this stuff like just on used for, like, people were getting rid of their stereos in the 90s, I guess, and 2000.
well, AudioGone, which is this site, which is a high-end
Mm-hmm.
audio classified. It's like the Discogs of audiophile stuff. And yeah, you if you knew you were getting something that was quality, you knew you could sell it back to somebody.
Yeah, it holds its value.
Yeah, but as far as being a record collector, the greatest new vinyl find that you can do is an upgrade in your system. Everything sounds new, fresh, different, like you've never heard before, even from a cartridge, to an amp, to speakers, whatever. But I wanted, I had this, massive investment in the music, and I just felt I was being an idiot for not trying to milk the most out of it.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. And so again, I got plenty. I could stop today and I got,
But you don't.
yeah, that's right. There's a special place in hell for all of us. Um, and so it was, that was a really valuable time, and I love my system, and, but I'll, occasionally swap something out, more now, like a cartridge.
Yeah.
And same with my collection. I'm way more targeted on something that I will want, you know, and so there isn't that much. I'm really enamored with, you know, what goes on in Bandcamp now, you know, especially in the jazz realm, you know
Yeah, you're
this.
up on a lot of new stuff that's coming out today.
Yeah. And they're, you know, because the major labels aren't dealing with it.
Hmm.
And so this is where it is. And there's so much incredible jazz stuff that's happening in Europe, in Scandinavian countries, you know, um, Norway, Sweden, you know, but also other, in England, obviously there's a scene,
Yeah,
in,
that's a
London, there's a scene going on. And so that is been really cool for me to try to keep abreast of jazz artists and jazz labels that are pressing vinyl even in small quantities, you know. And so that's been a really cool thing.
yeah, it's the tons of great stuff coming out. It's hard to keep up with all of it.
Yeah.
You do you have any other like you talk about like 3 4 year phases where you go deep?
Yeah.
So were there any others in there? Like we've done rock, punk, jazz. Is there any other
Yeah,
piece?
well, I went pretty deep also in, in classical, uh when I because this
In the
guy, you can't even imagine what these sessions were like. And that's so I got so enamored too with Mark and John, the Dr. Rhythm channel, with their sessions. Actually, when I was with David when he passed away, and I wrote his obituary, and I heard from uh, uh, guys that he went to college with in his fraternity that were like, "Oh my God, he was doing this back in the '60s." He goes, "He's in his dorm room and he's got a turntable in a drawer where most people would put their underwear." And it said every Friday night he was hosting these listening sessions. So he never stopped. So
So this he was someone who was older than you. We're
yeah,
not
he was,
not your
yeah,
generation.
yeah. He was like, he was 10 years older than me. And, and, and that's a really critical thing too, where you have older people, who don't treat you like a snot-nosed kid.
Yeah,
Go away, you don't know anything.
take you under their wing.
I know more than you. I learned right then and there that yeah, yeah, you know yeah, I know some stuff, and and
Willing
I
to share.
feel, passionate about sharing.
Love that. What about your brothers? Did they kind of follow suit with you in the like journey of discovery and opening their ears to all types of different sounds? Did you influence them in that way, your older brothers, or did they kind of stick?
Well, my oldest brother, who came home with those albums, he was also the first person that I ever knew that had, legitimate hi-fi system, you know.
So he was
But
passionate
again,
about it too, then.
he did everything frugally. Yeah, I'll never forget. This would have been what, 1970. I'll never forget going over to his place, and he plopped down uh, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young's "Deja Vu," and I can still, you know, if I ever hear a song from that album, I'm right on that couch that I was sitting, and you know, uh, that only know viscerally, it it's just a unique experience, and once you've experienced it, it's hard not to want that all
Yeah.
the time. you know
So that was a moment for you.
when did you hit, when did you hear sort of a proper setup, where you were just like, oh my God, that's amazing?
I mean, I'm not a huge audiophile guy. I have, you know, been around, but me, it's always more about the feeling that the music gives me, um,
Right.
the energy of it. Obviously, it's nice when it sounds really good, and sometimes it's, you know, influenced by how you feel too in that moment because of whatever you're hearing or where you are, who you're with. But yeah, I'm always been more about the feeling, the energy that I feel from the music.
Same here. It's just yeah, the music always comes first. Um, but just, you know, to have it revealed to you in more detail and glory is just something that was important to me. And I'm not one of those. I mean, audiophile again is sort of a odd term. You know, I'm not one of those guys that listens to their equipment,
Mm-hmm.
because that, you know, there are audiophiles that they listen to their gear, and music is a vehicle to listen to their gear. And it's like, huh, did you hear that? I heard a gnat fart.
I
Yeah.
don't have that ear, you know, and it's
Yeah.
maybe, I mean, I have an okay system, but it's not something I've invested heavily in.
Yeah.
Probably maybe in the future, I'll slowly upgrade some stuff, but I have a decent enough that I can really enjoy the music.
I want to remember. I think wasn't maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago. You got a new. You have. I know your journey that you've upgraded stuff because
Yeah,
you.
I definitely have, and now I'm
Yeah.
at a like I have, I don't know now, but you can see there Marantz
Yeah.
1250 and a Techniques 1401. So you know it's decent, but
Well, as I say, you can't hang that from your earlobes, so you're doing good. You're doing good, man.
um, so I think you picked out some records for us. I mean, that was a pretty good journey overview of
Yeah.
your
No,
journey.
you would ask, you know, and so this is just some top of mind stuff that these are records that have never for 1 second gotten old.
That
You know,
was your kind of filter when you were picking them.
yeah, yeah.
Beautiful.
You know, ones that, and this is only a handful of those. I could, you know, I could probably pull a quarter of these records and say,
Sure.
but these are ones that, you know, for whatever reason had, you know, some impact. You know, I know them note by note, you know, and even that they've never worn their luster has never worn off for me. So
I'm curious to
okay,
see what you got.
I'll show you a few. Well, early on in, you know, my jazz discovery, you know, I said I discovered Bitches Brew, but I also discovered this one.
That's
And I just make no bones about it. This is my favorite Miles Davis record, period.
with no ring. I'm
I
impressed.
love his music, all phases, all eras of his music. But this one, and you're going to hear some words repeated probably with this pile, but it's so mysterious. It's so atmospheric, dark, moody. It just, you know, it hit me then, it hits me now. It's one of those albums that takes me somewhere else really quickly.
I well, first of all, just can't believe how clean that cover is. That one always has ringwear. That looks like a brand new copy. But Miles is someone I've collected, listened to. You know, we all get into Miles, and I somehow that one had not crossed my path. I hadn't really got to it, and I was at my sister's place, and my brother-in-law was playing. I'm like, oh my god, what is this?
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's that earlier period. Like I just love the energy. Like you said, it's atmospheric. It's not that like out there stuff like the when you get into the 70s and the Britches Brew. It has that exploratory
Oh,
and different electric sound, but it stays in this pocket where it's accessible and just creates an amazing
yeah,
soundscape.
and it's the album just before Bitches Brew, and but part of the deal, John McLaughlin's on it. So again, it goes back to this Mahavishnu Orchestra thing, and looking at the back of covers, and you know who's on this stuff, and you know, but that that that's an all timer.
And
So
where'd you get that one, knowing that it looks brand new? How long have you had that for?
it's a newer I mean I got that when I was at the record store. I
Okay.
had an earlier copy that was ring-wired all to hell, you know. And also I have a mobile fidelity version of it too, you know. But I kind of like the original, you know. From that sort of punk and new wave era, Talking Heads, Fear of Music, just a brilliant, brilliant piece. Of course, you know, Eno's fingerprint is all over it as well. But this is just smart, quirky stuff that I just love. And you know, the diamond plate, you know, textured cover, you know, it's music made by artists, and you know, just love that. Um, utterly cliche, but I will never tire of Robert Johnson's King of the Delta Blues. Again, moody, dark, evocative, spooky. You know, it just has an atmosphere that you can't find very often in whatever genre you're looking at. It's just amazing. You know, 1960,
So
but all stuff
influential.
recorded, you know, in 36, 35, 36. It's just brilliant and an immensely influential. You know, we talk about, you know, jazz being, you know, this American art form. Then what is this? Because if it wasn't for blues, there wouldn't really, I mean, jazz, its influence on jazz, its influence on rock and roll. I mean, you can even, you know, it's anti-influence, like on krautrock, you know, well, we don't want any blues-based whatever. You know, you're either working for it or against it, man, you know. And but this is so brilliant, you
Agreed.
know. Over the years, I've become a huge fan of Indian classical music, and probably the person now that really stands out for me, I've shown this before, it's Nikhil Banerjee.
Oh, don't know it.
Sitar player. Um, he was actually had the same master as Ravi Shankar, but set him up. You know, this was smart enough to, you know, what are these people about? What are their skills? You know, and really set them in kind of different directions where, you know, Shankar is, you know, a lot of bravado. You know, even he can do, you know, he can get, you know, intricate and subtle, but he's really, you know, really about bravado, and he's very good at that. You know, Banerjee can do that as well, but he's a lot more subtle. His playing, he does a lot more sliding up and down the frets, things like, you know, little techniques like this. Really, really, it just hits my brain just right. Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. I don't know a lot of Indian classical. I mean, I have a couple, but it's not a genre I'm
Yeah.
too familiar with.
Again, totally transformative. Just bam, just puts you somewhere else. You know, takes you away. Calgon, take me away. Um, Astor Piazzolla, the Tango Master.
I know the
Um,
name, but don't know the music.
yeah, and this is on American Clave, which was that label, the Kip Hanrahan. You may have heard John Kiefer, you know, talk about it. This is just so good. The Rough Dancer and the Cyclical Night. It is just really, again, moody, evocative, erotic, very sexy stuff.
Love the
You
cover.
know, yeah, well, you know, if you feel like armpit is your thing, there you go.
I feel like just know the name from like a another record with someone. I'm trying to
Gary
think.
Burton,
Yeah,
perhaps.
maybe, or is it
Yeah, he did one with Gary Burton,
someone else too? I'm trying to think. Not
but
Jack.
it's really cool. It just has it's so textured as well. The layers and the texture. It's really great. Now you'll get a big smile out of this one, I know.
Indeed, that is dear to my heart.
Love Dave Van Ronk. I mean, the mayor of McDougal Street, this guy ruled Greenwich Village before Dylan showed up. Such a great record. Um, he was a friend of mine. Uh, cocaine, cocaine blues, chicken is nice. I
Oh,
believe
oh,
it or not, I can remember I was a senior in high school and in the art room, and we had a radio on, FM radio, and they played Cocaine Blues from Dave Van Ronk. This is like 1975. And I heard this on the radio, and and I just stopped. I heard this guy. What's this gravelly voice? I mean, who is this? And I just stopped and I just waited until the DJ said who it was, and then I went out immediately. And yeah, I
that
folk master, man.
he was a friend of mine. Cocaine, blues. Those are like two of the first songs I ever remember hearing as a human. My dad would be like, that's what he would play me. And I don't know his albums because he had a two first set, the Prestige.
Right, the silver covered one.
Yeah, exactly. So
Which that album's half of it.
yeah, exactly. So that's how I have his copy here today. And just that was, my dad would make a mixtape, so we'd listen to him on cassette in the car of that stuff and a whole bunch of other kind of artists.
Man, that is some cool first memories. You're lucky, man. That's awesome.
And then he would be like, "Oh, don't tell your mother I'm playing you this stuff," like the Cocaine Blues. And I remember Doc Watson too, some amazing songs that we would listen to in the car.
Awesome. That's awesome.
And what was the other thing? Oh yeah, one song from him that I discovered later on through the downloading was called "Losers," and that is one where his voice is on display, the raspiness in such an intense way. I absolutely love that track, "Losers." I don't know if you've heard it, but
Yeah, no, and he's such a cool guitar player too.
yeah,
But he was just very much into the folk tradition, much like blues, where there are these songs that have been around for a long time, and you do your spin on them. You might twist it a few degrees here and there, and it's all okay. It's like, ooh, you're doing somebody else's song. There's none of that.
yeah.
Hubris. Soul. Does it get any better than Otis Redding?
What is that record? I don't even know.
Okay, if you're gonna get an Otis Redding record, this is the best of Otis Redding, and it's a double album too. For this is actually a Japanese pressing because I love this, and I've got other single albums of his, but this just has everything, and it's one of the best comps you'll ever find ever. And I love the artwork with the collage, newspaper collage.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, just awesome.
Love Otis Redding, obviously.
Funk. Does it get any funkier than the Meters? Now,
what is that?
This is uh-oh. I forgot to shut my phone off. Hang on. There we go. So, believe it or not, this is an Island Records release, but it's of their Josie, their initial Josie record.
Yeah.
So this is how I discovered them, and well, looky there, I got it in the cutout bin. It's got this funky. It's an ugly ass cover.
Yeah.
Textured thing, but
music hits hard.
Yeah, there they are. But it's got Chicken Strut, Live Wire, it's Sissy Strut. It's from their first record, just re-released on Island. And it's so tough, and Ziggy Modaliste is just one of the best drummers ever. Guys, just killer.
That cover does not match the contents.
No, I don't know that.
Bad marketing.
That's a disaster as a cover. Kind of in the rock vein. Absolutely love this album, Shoot Out the Lights, Richard and Linda Thompson. I discovered Richard Thompson back in high school, and immensely unique guitar player, especially, of course, came up through Fairport Convention, but wife Linda, great voice, sort of was the Sandy Denny replacement model. But this album, they were in the midst of breaking up, getting divorced. The songs are just emotional and dark as all hell.
What's the name of the record? It's completely unfamiliar with it.
It's called Shoot Out the Lights.
Shoot Out the Lights.
Yeah. So Richard Thompson sings some, Linda sings others. I saw them live. They did a tour that was just amazing. I mean, they're getting divorced, and Richard Thompson's over here on the stage. Linda's way over here. But the energy of this negative situation just created amazing music. And this is an immensely great album.
What year are we talking?
82.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. Now, I hadn't talked about, country or bluegrass, which I'm a fan of the old country. And I'm particularly a fan of George Jones, just one of the greatest singers of any genre, just emotive singer. And, gotta love a flat top and these
never heard of his name.
His jackets. There's Johnny Paycheck before Take This Job and Shove It. But Love Bug, I'm wasting good paper. I'd rather switch than fight. Take Me. I mean, a lot of great classic. This is just some of the songs. I mean, they're they might be about getting drunk and losing your wife or whatever, but there's enough of that going on in the world, so there is some truth. Yeah, but it's just, what a great singer. What a great singer.
And that was what, 50s or 60s?
Oh, that's 60s.
60s, yeah.
And then I love John Hartford. So this is bluegrass, but this is really newgrass. This is John Hartford kind of brought this hippie ethos to acoustic music and bluegrass. He wrote, he got lucky as a songwriter and hit the lottery. He wrote the song Gentle on My Mind that Glenn Campbell recorded. So this guy became his pockets were loaded and allowed him to make whatever music that he wanted.
It's always a nice thing, some creative freedom.
Yeah, so this is he's an incredibly ironic writer. Again, ironic. He sings in this sort of delicious monotone. But he's got, Dave Holland plays bass on this. Dave Holland spent some time doing bluegrass. And
what year are we talking here?
71, 72.
It's an interesting cover. It's kind of modern in a way that doesn't.
Yeah, but he was able to kind of bridge a gap with like Deadheads, Grateful Dead, Deadheads and stuff, because Jerry Garcia had this bluegrass background. And I totally skipped, had no interest in my senior prom because there was a concert in Lawrence, Kansas that John Hartford and Norman Blake and Vassar Clements were playing, and I had to go, But I love the skill of bluegrass players, Fast and Furious, High and Lonesome. It's great stuff. Never Tire. This is one of those cutouts that I got. Never Tire. About to Lunch. And there you go. Here's the little notch. But Eric Dolphy is just an all-time favorite. I mean, Eric Dolphy when you hear him. I mean, when he takes a solo, whether it's with Mingus or whoever, man, he just kicks the door down and comes in swinging hard. And swinging not in the traditional like big band sense, but man, he's going for your groin, he's going for your throat, and just such a unique, those intense intervals in his playing, high to low, just, and what an important record. It's just never tire of it.
I remember when I was first starting to buy jazz CDs, it was mostly Blue Note stuff, but Blue Note, Riverside, Prestige, anything, all of these reissue CDs in the early 2000s. And this guy that I was working with was into jazz, and I had decided I was going to start buying jazz. And so he was talking to me, and I think it was like 3 for $30. So I'd always buying these like 3 for $30. And I told him I had bought that and I hadn't opened it yet. And he told me to return it, basically. Well, I decided to return it based on his explanation. He loved the record, but he's like, I don't think this is maybe the best place for you to start in the first few CDs. So I ended up exchanging it for something else, and then bought it again years later. But I thought that was funny because he was kind of like giving me the lay of the land because he was like way deep into it,
Yeah, well, it's something, I have known a couple guys that got into jazz on the deepest end. That's where it started for them. They connected there.
Yeah.
That's unique for sure. And, that's an album
where you're coming from, obviously,
Yeah. But Out to Lunch is an album you have to work towards, and maybe you don't get there, and that's okay too. Maybe you like some other aspects, but I was talking with John and Mark. One of the things I love about listening to music is being surprised. Being surprised. Cut to cut. Within an album or just an improvisational solo, it's going somewhere you didn't expect, and you go, that's cool. And that's Dolphy. You just can't expect where he's going to go. It's awesome. Kind of a twofer in a way here. Billie Holiday, again, moody, evocative, brilliant stuff. This is the first album I ever got of hers. It is a compilation stuff that was recorded on Columbia. Some of her some stuff with Teddy Wilson, and some of the the brilliant stuff that she did with Lester Young. Now, Lester, I'm not showing Lester, but Lester's probably, if I had to pinpoint my all-time favorite musician, it would be Lester Young. And the stuff, how they understood each other, and the emotion that comes through when they're playing, his playing and her singing, it's pure magic. It's goosebumps for me.
Me too. I mean, I know a lot of people in this VC jazz world don't really like vocal jazz. And I when I was getting into jazz, I was buying Billie Holiday, Sarah Vaughan, all that stuff, and there's something that is just so moving, and like you said, gives you goosebumps.
I mean, everybody approaches things differently. I mean, I don't connect at all with this idea of jazz vocals, because how do you then handle someone like Neil Young, whose vocals, or Dylan, they're vocalists, the singer-songwriter anyway. But, and instruments are based off of trying to emulate the human voice. So, the ultimate is the human voice for me, anyway. But yeah, it's so evocative, and whatever she tries to communicate, she can do it, and just so clearly, in emotion.
Are you familiar with one of my favorite jazz vocal albums that is outside of the classics of is it's a Sarah Vaughan live at Mr. Kelly's that I just randomly bought on CD. I don't know if
I don't have that.
That was one I used to just listen to over and over. I would play it for people when they would come over all the time. And I found it a couple times on vinyl, but it's always sounds terrible. So I haven't actually bought a copy on record, but that's one that is special to me, live at Mr. Kelly's.
I would have loved to have met Sarah Vaughan, because everything I understand, she could swear like a sailor. That would have been fun. And last, I wanted to put up a classical record, and in particular, this third symphony from Witold Lutosławski, Polish composer. I think he was born in 1913 and died in the early 90s. But this third symphony premiered in Chicago in 1983. Not my friend David, but another friend from our group that was at these Friday night listening sessions went to the premiere in Chicago and bootlegged a cassette of the performance and brought it back. And I mean, you talk about nerding out. When he came back with this, like, it's this like holy grail of a recording, bootleg thing. We'd sat down and listened to it. And then a couple years later, the premiere recording came out. It's not the same performance or anything, but through my friend David, I just came to love Lutosławski. Very dynamic stuff, and he had a interesting way of composing where I forget the term that he used, but he left some elements sort of open to self-interpretation, meaning he wrote the notes for the players, but he left off what the connections were to other sections of the orchestra, if that makes sense. Mm. So there are parts of it. Boy, he's really after me. Anyway, sorry about that. So there's moments where they're playing the notes, but they're independent of like what the violins might be doing with the cellos, So there's parts of it that get, kind of wobbly, but it's just, there's so much texture. It's a very, very large orchestra. People that, say like Anthony Braxton or like what later Anthony Davis, when he's actually, considered a classical composer now. Really what Roscoe Mitchell's been up to for a number of years, I think could handle and enjoy some of this stuff. But yeah, I had to honor my friend David,
Classical is something where I can enjoy and appreciate, but if I'm in a shop, I don't know the first thing about what I would be looking for. But
that's where you need a guide, man. You need someone, who can, grab you by the hand and, try this, let me know what you think. If you like that, we'll point you down another road, that type of thing.
Yeah. There's one guy at the shop here that's like a classical nut. He loves it. I remember him coming over when I was at the listening station with this classical record, and he was super excited to show me that it was Rudy Van Gelder in the Dead Wax.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you recall what the album?
No, I'll ask him. But this was like a couple of years ago. But I remember because he knows I'm into jazz and stuff like that. So he was like, "You check this out."
You know what attracted you to want to listen to this record?
I wasn't listening to it. I was just at the listening station going through my stack, and he saw me, and like I see him regularly.
I got you.
And he comes over and he's like, "Check this out. Rudy Van Gelder, is the engineer on this classical record."
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, thank you for, such a diverse mix of records that you showed there, which I guess is representative of your tastes and your collection and your journey over the years.
Yeah, it's generally, jazz takes up the predominant portionality of the collection. I have a larger, rock collection than you might think. I'm really proud of my blues collection. It covers all the bases. And so, and I've always viewed it as a living library, mm-hmm. Where, before Spotify, things like this came along, the rationale was, well, if there's something I want to listen to, it's there in some way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you remember Jeff White. He was early on in the VC. Jeff Record Man, 1958.
Oh,
But he said, people ask me, why do you have so many records? And his answer was, it's all I can afford.
I mean, we've been going for a while, but something that I like to do, and I know that people really enjoy, if you're willing to humor me, is to do one or two blind pulls. It gives people just, you got all those records behind you, just to close your eyes
Sure.
and pull a random one or two out.
Do you have a preference for a section, or?
Let's do jazz. I know a lot of people.
Well, that's all behind me there.
Perfect. So let's.
Well, let's see. You probably know what's there, so I won't pull from there.
Surprise us.
Yeah,
we know what that.
Yeah, there's Coltrane. So okay, here we go. Let's see what we can do.
Always fun for.
I'll just reach out for a couple things, I guess, just randomly.
And it gives us a chance to see your little beautiful system set up there.
Oh, this is kind of cool. Well, it's beyond ironic that one of the things that I pulled was some VCLT from Fred, Big Star 1000.
Oh, DC legend.
Don Burrows Quartet live at Montreux. Not
familiar at all.
Well, it's worth the pants.
Yeah.
But he was one of the larger, well-known names within Australian jazz.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think that's so cool that VCLT was came out. And this is Keshavan Maslak, who is now also known as Kenny Millions.
Okay.
This is a Black Saint record. It does not look like a Black Saint cover.
Totally not.
Yeah, but he's a sax player, and alto and tenor. So this is alto and tenor and Charles Moffat on drums. So it's kind of Ornette Coleman-y, I guess. But you'll like some of the song titles: "Blast Your Mama," "Jizz and Cocktails," "Blaster Master," "Jazz," Jim Jizbo, and Judy Jizbo.
What year is that from?
84.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's essentially avant-garde stuff, but not a well-known Black Saint artist.
Never seen that. You were big into Black Saint in the 80s, I would imagine.
Well, yeah. So because I'm at the store, working at the store, so it was jazz buyer. And at that time, man, Black Saint was keeping really jazz alive on vinyl. Ironically, there was a brief period around 80 to 82, like Columbia was putting out jazz records. Arthur Blythe,
mm-hmm.
James Blood Ulmer. Yeah, they were making a little attempt at that, but the deeper stuff, Black Saint and Soul Note over in Italy was a godsend in keeping that going.
Yeah,
so
I've heard that from a few people.
Yeah, so I was right there at the right time for a lot of that stuff, but yeah, no, it's been, as I said, a lifelong deal, lifelong learning. It's the greatest time machine that's been invented yet.
Definitely.
And it's also the greatest salve when times are weird and times are tough. And we're certainly experiencing that now. And yes, just to have a little bit of time to get away from it and get transported somewhere else for a little bit of time is incredibly valuable for up here
Hmm.
and right here.
Definitely keeps you grounded and definitely healing. I mean, a lot of the music we listen to is, I find the energy creates this. Some of it can be stirring, but it's all kind of, for me, it's all about creating that good feeling and good energy.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you
Absolutely.
very much for taking the time to take us through your journey.
Oh man,
Well,
I have to thank you. Um, these are, as I said, they're really cool. Yeah, I'm. It's a really smart, cool thing, and appreciate you doing it for
yeah,
sure. So
I hope
I'm
to
just,
continue.
I'm elated that you ask, and more than happy to participate. And like I said, I'll be back on here shortly.
The people are I would probably say impatiently waiting, but at this point they've gotten used to it, so they're going to be thrilled to see you pop
Yeah,
up. So,
I'm not the the most voracious video makers, so
but the
I'm
highest
sure something like that will continue. But I'll do what I can when I can.
quality over
No,
quantity.
thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks, Teddy. We'll be in touch.
Absolutely
Take care.
appreciate it.